It's interesting how our history has been hidden from us. It's almost forbidden. Recently, one of my listeners, his father lives in Iran, and there was an earthquake about a year or two ago. And after the earthquake, some ruins all of a sudden became unearthed. And they started digging and they found skeletons about 9 feet tall of women in that area of the world. And it really makes you wonder what else they're hiding from us. Next.
Discounting the man-made disasters that we just discussed, what about the earth changes that I've heard the entire gamut of anticipation for? Go back there and look at that map and just, I want some perspective on what you think.
Great question, great question. She's asking, yes, we know about the man-made disasters, but how about the earth changes? I mean, this year alone, in my lifetime, I've never seen so many earthquakes. I've never seen so many tornadoes, killer tornadoes, floods, volcanoes. It really makes you wonder if the earth is really expanding, and when it expands, you're more experts than I am, but when it expands, we get, stronger winds, stronger earthquakes, stronger volcanoes. So what about earth changes? Is there a correlation? Let me just, if I may, with your permission, add, we think of 2012 next year and all these earth changes. Is there a correlation? And who wants to take this question from all of you?
From all of you.
Okay. Oh, she says all. So she wants to know of all the perspectives. Okay.
All right, you start.
All right, raise the bar.
Okay, from my perspective, basically, it's a no-brainer. The volcanic and earthquake activity has increased up to 400%. You just have to look at the charts. It's undeniable. And if you get out in nature, and if you're aligned with nature, you just know. You hear it in the wind. You watch the changes. You watch the crazy weather we're having. And you just pay attention to your own inner guidance, and it's telling you without a doubt something is perturbing the earth in a very big way. And I don't think it's one thing, because we're moving into alignment with galactic plane. There's some very large magnetic energies coming at us and through us, and we've got a highly energized place in space that we're moving into. The Russian scientists have talked about that. You've got, the Earth expanding, and she's evolving, going through her process. So every way you look at it, just even by the science and by the prophecy and the Mayan calendar and everything else, everybody thinks all these changes are going to hit in 2012. You're in the middle of it now. It's not something that's all going to happen, and then 2012 we're going to all hold hands and skip off to the fifth dimension. There is a major shift. I mean, I can go more into that. There is a huge shift. I've been given a lot of information that, the mini world theory, that there's going to be a split, the Hopi prophecies, all of them talk about this split that happens. And when you get into higher physics, it makes sense. When I first heard this, I thought I was going nuts, that there would actually be two worlds and two Earths. But having people in my classes disappearing and reappearing on a regular basis and watching masters do this, it all makes sense to me that all you have to do is raise your frequency up a little bit, and you can step into a whole different reality, a whole different world. And that's what we're focusing on mainly, is moving beyond that. I'm doing guided meditations with kahunas and a lot of powerful people at ground zero on an earthquake, right underneath our feet. We didn't even know what happened. And when we came outside of the building, everybody was out freaking out outside, just like scared. And we didn't even know what happened. We said, what happened? And they said, we had a 5-point-something earthquake right underneath our feet. But we were outside of that reality. We had moved up in frequency. And everybody in the meditation, Ezekiel's energy came in, got really hot. And they were taking off their sweaters and everything. They're going, geez, this is intense. We got through with a message. It was a channeled message. And at the end of the channeling, we walked outside, and that's when we saw that we were at ground zero on an earthquake. So my thing is that there's going to be as many realities unfolding as there are people. And your future is going to be determined by your choices. And I also believe, too, is that, right now it's probably not a good idea to be sitting along the coast or right next to a major river or sitting on top of a volcano, because the odds aren't with you, that it's not going to move. And We always say it's time to lovingly and joyously prepare. You know, if you love yourself, buy a bag of rice and beans, you know. Take care of yourself. If you love your family, you know, put some things away for them. So you take care of them. You don't do it out of fear, you do it out of love. You know, that's the bottom line.
I definitely agree with James that a lot of the Earth changes are directly linked to the galactic plane alignment and the huge amounts of energy that we've been exposed to, but I also believe that it's directly linked to the collective rising consciousness, and everything is connected on that level. And we're being prepared for some of these events, being prepared collectively and individually, and also agree with the concept and the principle of a frequency separation based on levels of consciousness. Because we are a planet that's been highly messed with, and the evolution of our species is certainly not according to the natural order of things. It is highly manipulated and maliciously activated and abused. Therefore, we have such a diverse number of race groups, number of belief systems, number of incompatible scenarios and situations and cultures. How could that possibly happen from a unified beginning and a unified source? So you've got all these different levels of consciousness. I believe we've been prepared for this shift in consciousness, and it's incredible when you look at what's happening in quantum physics and the laws of nature, as we are finding out, how on a molecular structure we're even being prepared for things that are happening. In case you're not aware of this, you know, in my presentation I talk about number 6 being the number of the physical materialization, number 5 being the number of the divine source. Well, it's interesting when you climb the axis mundi, the shaman climb the axis of the earth, it's from the physical to the spiritual world. Interesting enough that the molecules like DMT and other hallucinogenic molecules actually represent the 6 and the 5 dimensions right next to each other. It's a hexagon, 6 carbon molecule, or a structure attached to a 5 carbon molecule. That's the structure of DMT. And so with most other hallucinogenic drugs. So we've been prepared for that shift in consciousness, in a rapid explosion in consciousness, and then also our ability to understand when time collapses, because that's what the minds predict, everything is speeding up. Well, what's going to happen when it's sped up where it can no longer speed up? It means time, past, present, and future is collapsing into each other. So what's happening is through the understanding of quantum physics and all this basic stuff that we're now coming to understand is that we've been prepared to grasp or be comfortable, not necessarily totally understand, but be comfortable with the concept of crossing from space-time to time-space. Because that is a seriously difficult concept for all of us to comprehend. I can't even understand it, and I've been looking at it for a long time. I still struggle with it. So I think we've been prepared for that in 2012, and the galactic alignment is playing a crucial role in that raise of consciousness.
Bob said something in his presentation that really excited me. He said that Earth is alive. In a presentation I made here a few years ago, we talked about the union of the polarity. I was explaining to a non-scientist one time that Earth's made up of 2 different kinds of matter occupying the same space at the same time. A higher vibrational matter, which some call spirit matter, and a lower vibrational matter, which some call temporal matter. And he said, well, how can that be 2 forms of matter occupying the same space at the same time? And I said, well, you have a 5-gallon bucket full of glass marbles, and then you take water and pour it in around the marbles. Now you have 2 forms of matter occupying the same space at the same time. Not unlike the human body. We are just the chicken sandwich that we just ate right out there. But what animates us, the being inside, the force inside of us, that creative, awake, loving, leaping gazelle inside of us is the real you. This genetic shell that we're trying to interpret our universe through with a very little spectral analyzer here, and a chemical spectral analyzer in our tongues, and a little bit of thermal sensing on our fingers, and auditory sensing. This one doesn't work so well, by the way. But this is how we interpret our universe. It's limiting, very limiting. The spirit inside cries to interpret more, to sense more of our universe. And that's why all of you here are awake and are doing it. And Michael's exactly right. Our consciousness, our presence here is part of the equation of Earth going through this change. The 7 billion consciousnesses that are here on this Earth right now are an integral part of that process. And Earth has come to this point many times in its 26,000 year cycle. It hasn't made it before, but it can this time.
The Druidic lore, what the Druids did, who they were, etc., is like you could write it on the back of a postage stamp, really, because nobody knows. And their method of discussing reality and translating reality and perceiving reality, the only fragments that exist of that are actually in like folklore, in songs. In Ireland they call them pishogs, and one has to look very deeply to see what the Druids knew, and they're one of the kind of earliest indigenous shamanic peoples who have the closest connection to the Atlanteans, those perhaps being the last great civilization before things changed big style. And from my study into this Druidic lore and these Druidic accounts, which were rarely from the Druids themselves because they never wrote anything down for very good reason, which anyone coming to the workshop tomorrow will talk more about that. But essentially they said something rather interesting, which is periodically the sun cleanses the earth, and there is like a shift where it says, okay, we're going to give you X thousand years to understand how to increase the vibrational level of your consciousness. And it's a long time, and you'll go through several lifetimes. We've all talked about this reincarnational, parallel lives, whatever you want to call it. Don't think of it just between 0 and 100 in a normal human lifetime. But every now and again, the whole thing gets rebooted. I wrote an essay on this 5 years ago, and I think that rather than seeing that as an apocalypse, which just means an unveiling, by the way, and rather than seeing that as the end of days, it is kind of like a threshold moment. It's cleansing, and nobody really loses out in this. So even those who perish, you know, horror of horrors, those who perish really just come to a different level of understanding in a different space. They also did discuss this separation, as James mentioned, a so-called bifurcation, a split in the timelines. And those completely hooked into the 3D will remain in a 3D space. And those interested in ascension and beginning ascension as a perfectly natural thing, nothing special, but as a normal, natural, organic process, will continue on their path. And none are bad and none are good, they're just different. But the way this is expressed is through the sun. And there is some research showing that there is a permanent tunnel from the sun to the earth. And as other commentators and speakers and people I've spoken to in the audience have said, that we are getting kind of infused and bombarded with radiation that is kind of changing us on a molecular level. And part of that is like a diagnostic tool to see where we're each at in our process, in our unfoldment. And depending on where you're at will depend on where you need to be. And it doesn't mean that the advanced people go up and the unadvanced people stay down, because some advanced people say, I need to stay in 3D to help people through this. So it's a very interesting time, and you know, unfortunately that information is far away from us, we don't really know, but the best preparation is psychological preparation. It's to some extent, bring it on. I'm ready for it. You know, to be the warrior and to be fearless, just to stand there and say, if I'm going to drown, drown me. If I'm going to burn, burn me. And that is my attitude. You have to, you know, where possible, and I'm not obviously there myself or whatever, but rise above your own fears a little bit and just say, bring it on, and that's the healthiest way to do it. Bob.
Well, I'm facing a matter of confusion here. Try to come up with a reasonable answer to the question. What was the question? All I can tell you is, when I began my life, I searched for knowledge. Now that I'm ending my life, I'm searching for wisdom. I presume that I have found a little bit of it. And one of the conclusions I've reached is, there are no coincidences. There are no accidents. Everything is initiated, orchestrated under a plan. Now this plan was not initiated and orchestrated by a bunch of yo-yos in the Pentagon or Harvard or the White House or anywhere else. This initiated, orchestrated plan was initiated at a level so far beyond our understanding, infinitely in the stars, in the universe. You're living in a 3D dimensional world where everything is following a script. And as I said to you before, don't be afraid, because you don't have need for fear. You're infinite, immortal beings, and you're here by choice to be a participant in this incredibly unfolding, initiated, orchestrated program. I find it fascinating. But I've reached a point, hopefully, in my years of searching for wisdom where I have been able to step back, separate myself from the emotions, from the fear, from the struggle. And I'm watching it like you would watch a passing parade. I find it beautiful. I find it sometimes fearful. I find it infuriating. I find that I found myself excited, overwhelmed with a sense of joy, and I have reached a state in my personal life where the yogis and the holy men have called it a form of samadhi. I've reached a point where I'm no longer a participant in this passing parade, as it were. I find that I'm watching the play unfold like Shakespeare dramatized it. You know, where you come in stage right, and you prance about, you play with your toy swords, you make love, you have children, you have fights, wars and all that, blah, blah, blah. And finally you exit stage left, curtain closes, ready for the next play, ready for the next act. But I find myself watching it unfold. And I come here at a conference like this and I meet you lovely, beautiful, strange people. And I am exalted with joy by what I've seen. And I will close again and say, don't be afraid of anything. You'll live forever.